Hi, this is Jeff, and you're still sending me questions, so I'm still answering. And this one is from Jeff, and he's been watching some of the YouTube videos that we've produced, and he was curious about our using of commercial yeasts, and he's interesting how much they can change the taste and the flavor profile of a wine, and do we use a different yeast for each wine, and how do we decide what yeast to use, and whether or not we use any native fermentations. And yeah, yeast is a complicated topic, and a topic with a bit of controversy. But let's get straight to answering your questions. We don't do any native yeast fermentations here. And the primary reason for that is the vast majority of our wines are north of 14% alcohol. And as a wine ferments and the yeast is creating alcohol, it becomes more and more difficult for that yeast the environment becomes more challenging for the yeast as the alcohol rises. Now, a native yeast may or may not have been selected, or may not have the characteristics of being able to keep alcohol outside of the cell wall and still bring nutrients in. Commercial yeasts, on the other hand, have been bred and selected for that exact characteristic. We want as vintners knowledge that the fermentation is going to go to completion, meaning all of the sugar that's in the grape is going to be consumed and converted into alcohol. And we want that for a couple of reasons. One, I don't want to sell you a sweet wine. And two, if the wine is sweet and it goes through the malolactic fermentation where bacteria is converting malic acid to lactic acid, if they consume all of the malic acid and there's grape sugar left, they'll work on the grape sugar. But the problem is the byproduct isn't lactic acid, it's acetic acid or vinegar. And so when we make our selections for yeast, and yes, we do use different yeasts for different varieties. We use probably 4 or 5 different yeasts, but the vast majority is of our fermentations are conducted by Premier Cuvée, Prise de Mousse. And the selection process and why we use it is because it's very alcohol tolerant. We do use some other yeasts. We use 2054 for the Syrah. It helps bring out the earthiness and frames the varietal character of Syrah quite well. We use QA23 for the Viognier and the Rosé because it's designed to slowly ferment and also retain a lot of the grape's fruit character, which is what we want to deliver to you in the finished product. We also use Aspenhausen for the Pinot Noir, and that is because Pinot Noir is notoriously a fast fermenter, and Aspenhausen just kind of slows that all down a little bit, so the wine ends up, or the grapes, the skins end up being on the juice for your typical 6 to 7 days instead of 2 or 3. Fermentations can rocket with Pinot Noir, so we actually look for a slower yeast that ferments more slowly for that variety. So those are some of the thoughts and some of the ideas behind the yeasts we use, why we don't use natural yeasts, and why we use particular yeasts for our different products. But the most important thing for us is we want the fermentation to finish. There's a type of fermentation called a stuck fermentation, and that's when the yeast gives up without completely finishing the fermentation and consuming all of the grape sugar. And those are really not good moments. Lucky, knock on wood, we haven't had a stuck fermentation in quite a while. And a lot of it has to do with our yeast selection, along with adding some nutrients and making sure the temperatures don't get out of hand, because there's a lot of things that go into yeast health and how that converts to a clean, bright, fruit-forward wine without a lot of clutter with off odors that you can get when a yeast has to struggle to finish its fermentation. So thanks for your question, Jeff. Appreciate it.